Hey everyone, it's Zach here, and today I'm going to walk through an example AIOps use case that we at Red Hat have been referring to as ticket enrichment. And you may have seen this if you've attended some labs or sessions or even saw some videos on YouTube, but what I really want to do is dive into, one, the practicality of actually implementing this in a corporate environment, and also some of the details and bits around one way that you can actually do this. So if you dive into my blog, I actually go into some of my musings on what I'm seeing as far as how customers are viewing AIOps, especially with respect to automation. And in this case, I have identified about 4 phases. So the first phase being just leveraging the observability platforms that are out there that have their own AI baked in. And they have for a while. So that could be like a Dynatrace or a Datadog who is leveraging AI to correlate events and surface alerts to you that you can then act upon. To me, that's level 1, and you can do that with just vanilla event-driven Ansible, no additional AI downstream. The second phase, which is where I think the ticket enrichment use case comes into play, is when you have observability platforms or even just event-based logging tools that don't have any intelligence necessarily being applied, that are sending events to event-driven Ansible that are arbitrary or you may not know the cause of the event, leveraging AI within an Ansible playbook to then go and do some codified troubleshooting as well as getting some root cause analysis. So for me, that's kind of a transition from phase 1 to phase 2. Feel free to read through the blog. I go through 3 and 4 as well, but for today I'm just going to focus on 1 and 2 because that is where I think we can start our journey getting to phase 2 with a ticket enrichment use case. So the first thing I want to do is just open up my rulebook that's being used for this demo. And you may have seen this before if you've seen my Dynatrace related post, but it's very simple. It's just going to have one source, which is going to be replaced by an event stream in the Ansible automation platform. And those are going to be events coming from Dynatrace. And then this first rule is going to match against a particular type of event. So I'm building this as an add-on to an existing workflow I already have. I'm doing it in a known event type. So in this case, I know the event type is free disk space, but the pattern that I'm establishing can be used for an arbitrary event type. So keep that in mind as I go through it. But as you can see, I'm matching to a free disk space event, and I'm going to actually run a remediation as part of this workflow. But that's not the focus here. The focus is doing the troubleshooting and doing the AI analysis with or without a remediation. So this is the rulebook that's going to be the entry point into this workflow. I then want to hop over into the tasks that are going to be managing the AIOps portion of this. So if I scroll all the way up to my task file, which is linked in the references for this post, you'll see here that I've got this first task, which is defining rel diagnostic commands for RCA. So to me, this is where you're actually codifying your system administrator expertise. And you're basically able to manage this as kind of a living, breathing triage standard operating procedure. And so you're going to run these commands against any host that has an issue, and you're going to gather the output with Ansible, and you're going to send it to an AI and have the AI analyze and provide an RCA based on the results that you've dynamically retrieved, given in that an event has occurred. So if I scroll down, I'm basically just gathering the results from those commands. Scroll down. Ultimately, I get to where I'm using an OpenAI compatible endpoint. And you can see here in the body that there's 2 key parts. So one, I'm going to specify a model. So in this case, I'm using Llama. But in the messages, I have 2 messages. One is the system prompt. So this is where I'm basically giving the agent a persona. And I'm saying, you're going to be a rel SRE. Analyze the provided information I'm giving you. And then the second piece is I'm actually going to give them the information. So I'm mimicking the user that's actually uploading all this information that's been gathered, but it's all happening with Ansible. So if I keep going down, the next step would be I would take the output from AI and I'll put it on a ServiceNow incident, right? So again, arming L1 support who may pick up this incident and have to take action. If we scroll down though, you'll see that I do another integration with an AI. I switched up the model here, so now I'm reaching out to Quinn. But what I'm choosing to do is actually change the persona and basically say, hey, so Quinn, you're an enterprise architect. Not only should you take a look at the output that I've gotten from my diagnostics, but review the root cause analysis from the SRE. So kind of adding a layer of intelligence on top of AI and getting an additional review, you also may opt to send the exact same prompt to two different models just to get two different perspectives from the same persona. So if I scroll down, ultimately, same thing, adding that to the incident. And then what we'll ultimately see is in this particular workflow, which I'm not going to go into the details, I'm not going to remediate the issue. But the key is that we're actually going to see the AI analysis posted to the ticket where an L1 support agent could pick it up and potentially go in and implement adding disk space. Now, moving forward, I do think as you start to see trends and common patterns as far as incidents occur, do build out these remediations like the playbook I'm showing here. Don't always rely on AI because you can start to save tokens over time by not constantly having AI summarize the exact same type of issue. So with that, I'm going to hop over into the terminal. I'm going to fill up the disk space to simulate an event, and I'll be back in just a moment. So I've hopped into Dynatrace, and you can see that I've filled up the disk space. If we look at this chart here of disk space usage, so it's gone above 70% based on me filling up the disk artificially. So AIOps VM1 is the VM that I have, and I have the Dynatrace agent running, so it's monitoring this. You don't see a problem yet because the way Dynatrace works is it's going to require seeing that threshold breach for a certain amount of time. So in just a few moments, we should see a problem arise, which I just refreshed, and we see that there is a problem. So what that did was triggered a workflow in Dynatrace to send that event over the wire to event-driven Ansible. So let's go to event-driven Ansible and take a look at the Rulebook activation. You'll see there that it transitioned the fire count to 2. So that was a new event coming through Dynatrace events, which would have triggered the remediation workflow. So if we go to jobs, we see the remediation workflow running. It's already created the incident in ServiceNow. And now what it's doing is the AIOps ticket enrichment piece. So it's running those codified sysadmin commands against that AIOps VM machine directly. So this is the time savings that you're getting. There's not having to be an L1 support agent, sit down, log into that VM, run all those commands, analyze the output. It's all going to happen with Ansible before the L1 support agent picks up the incident. So let's go over into ServiceNow and see what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and refresh here. We should definitely have an incident, and it should be in progress because Ansible is working on it. Unpin that. So we've got our free disk space below 30%. So that was created by Ansible. Let's click in there. And I'm going to go ahead and change my view because it won't show the comments in this particular view. Oh. I'm going to change my view because it wouldn't show the comments in the default view that I land on. So while that's refreshed, we'll see if I scroll down. All right, I'm gonna start from the bottom and work my way up. So the first thing it did was I assigned a CI, which I actually use ServiceNow to provision this VM as well. So I assigned it to the incident. I then added a link to the problem. So that's on the Dynatrace side of things, just in case you wanted to go from ServiceNow to Dynatrace and do some triaging that way. I updated the event payload, or attached it to the incident, just in case somebody wants to inspect the actual details of the event. And then this is our initial RCA. So this is the rel SRE persona going and doing a root cause analysis, basically saying, hey, the disk space utilization on the root file system is at 74%. It's close to the threshold of 80%. So actually made mistakes. AI makes mistakes. The threshold is 70%, which has created the alert. When we scroll down here, it gives supporting evidence, recommended remediation steps, right? So cleaning up unnecessary files on that file system. Consider expanding the root file system, which is what we do in our remediation. And then suggest configuring monitoring and alerting to proactively prevent this in the future, right? I artificially expanded the disk all at once, but you could also use a proactive remediation as a disk starts to approach a threshold to go ahead and expand before you have a problem. Let's scroll up as well. So we have an additional post here. So this is my enterprise architect who has reviewed the RCA, adding some comments, pretty verbose. Part of this is just the nuances between the different models. This is Quinn versus Llama. And if we scroll down, reiterate some of the same points, which is what was asked of the enterprise architect, but also add some context. One of the key things that calls out that the SRE doesn't is that there's no swamp space available, not necessarily relevant to the disk space filling up, but something of note, and that's because this is a EC2 on AWS. And then also notices, the uptime of the system, that the system's not really under computational stress, so not an app running on this because I left it up idle for a while. But you can tell that the enterprise architect picks up some more stuff. So again, I mentioned that you might want to just have two different models with the same persona, do different analysis and see what you get. But the ultimate goal is to arm the human that's going to pick up this incident with information without having to log in and run those commands themselves. So if you found this interesting, I think this is a really practical use case to go out and implement and not really run into enterprise constraints of AI, because this is a safe operation. It's read-only against your production systems, and then you're writing to your ITSM, which is useful because it's adding context for the human that's ultimately going to pick this up. And it also helps you get ready for whatever that next phase of AIOps is that might be on your journey. So thanks for watching, and feel free to drop a note in the comments below if you have any questions.